am, along with my colleagues, Amanda Foki and Dennis Galvin, on the steering committee for the Fondren Fellows program, which provides opportunities for Rice graduate and undergraduate students to work on projects that have some kind of tie to the library, whether it's working on archival collections or on re-envisioning services or on using curatorial skills. And this year we have a very impressive cohort of students working on a wide range of projects, many of them in collaboration with faculty members, and some of them also involving teams of students. So today is devoted to learning about several of those really compelling projects. I am going to try to minimize my own speaking so we can have plenty of time to hear from the 11 fellows who will be speaking with us today, representing 7 different projects. So let's start out with Sydney Hicks, who will be giving a presentation that's kind of like a meta project on improving the Fondren Fellows program. So take it away, Sydney.
Awesome, thanks so much. Let me share my screen. Okay, can everyone see that okay? Great. Let me just move this box. Okay, awesome. So as Lisa said before, my name is Sydney Hicks, and I'm doing the Enhancing the Fondren Fellows program, and my mentor is also Miss Lisa. It's not clicking. There we go. So introduction, again, my name is Sydney. I'm a master's student in social policy evaluation here. And I just want to include my career goals and how it kind of ties into that. So for corporate social responsibility, that enables practices and policies undertaken by corporations intended to have a positive influence in the world. And also I'm very interested in diversity, equity, and inclusion policies. And basically it encourages like functional knowledge upon like fellow employees and identities and things in the workplace. So to start off, this project incorporates enhancing the Fondren Fellow itself and enhances communications, assessment tools, support of fellows and mentors. And based on that analysis, then I develop events, communications, templates, guides, and other things as well. So we did have a couple of events that I wanted to highlight, and these were kind of constrained due to COVID-19 regulations. So we were going to have a lot more, but given making sure that everyone was safe and comfortable, we had to keep it a little smaller. So we had the Fondren Fellows Kickoff event, and this is where we introduced fellows, mentors, and the different projects that we're all working on. We also did a career panel event. So we had a few faculty come and join the fellows in conversation and about working in libraries, archives, public history, as well as different career paths. We also lastly had a fellows luncheon that was really awesome to those who could come. It was kind of just an opportunity to build a stronger cohort and improve the program communication itself. So then getting to the assessment portion, so initially I did an initial intake form questionnaire, and as you can see to your right, that's kind of what the template looked like. And we talked on 2 different things, so the fellowship acceptance decision, as well as the strengths and weaknesses with the projects. So it was an attempt to find a trend of how the fellows heard about the opportunity, what intrigued the students to apply, and how it personally aligns to their academic goals or career goals and things along those lines, as well as touching on strengths and weaknesses on information technology, data collection, writing, independent and group work, as well as using the resources at the Fondren Library. So I thought it was really interesting to kind of get a baseline to see how fellows progress over time. Another assessment method is we do everyone's favorite biweekly reporting form. So basically it provided insights into fellows' goals and the tasks that they set out for the next upcoming 2 weeks. It also provided a space to discuss any challenges and allow me or Lisa to help them with that as well. Allowed fellows to provide any suggestions or feedback because, the whole point of this project is to enhance the Fondren Fellow program. So really actually getting the information from fellows was really important to kind of cultivate a better program and kind of figure out what is and isn't working. Next, we have the outtake form, and this is in progress, so fellows be on the lookout for that. So the questionnaire will help to analyze any changes in the fellows' abilities from the beginning of the program with the different things I showed in the beginning. And as we analyze this data over the next month, I will personally create a draft to draft up a report to kind of see the enhancements from the beginning baseline till now. And this will not be published, so any information that is shared in the document is strictly just between me and Lisa. And then it'll allow us space to discuss any improvements that could be made for the next cohort. So then the learning outcomes, I learned a lot through this program and how to, how to effectively launch a communication tool and track responses, successfully discuss concerns with fellows and work together to overcome a challenge, plan and organize events to boost fellows engagement. It's definitely enhanced my public speaking a lot. Speaking in front of a lot of people was something I was really nervous with, but working with Lisa, it's definitely helped over time. And learning to be a leader on most projects and carrying them out successfully. I think this is my first time I've actually been the spearhead of a lot of projects and a lot of things, and Lisa's gave me a lot of availability to kind of carry those out. And then again, just want to say thank you to the fellows for their dedication to their projects and, giving me the opportunity to carry out my own project and staying on top of the biweekly forms. And I know with that in school, it can get a lot. So I really do appreciate that. And in conclusion, just a huge thanks to Lisa for making this opportunity happen and bringing us all here together today.
Well, thank you so much, Sydney, for all your great work and for your excellent presentation. Next up, we have Arnav Sankaranthi, who will be talking about his work as part of the team on Translational Humanities for Public Health, and his mentor is Dr. Kirsten Oster. So take it away, Arnav.
All right, can everyone see this? Yes, okay. So hi everyone, my name is Arnav. I'm a junior at Brown and I'm majoring in biosciences and minoring in medical humanities. And this past year, I've been working as a Fondren Fellow for the Translational Humanities for Public Health project, which is run by Dr. Oster in the Medical Futures Lab. And I've been working with another fellow, Surabi, on this project, as well as other undergrads, grad students, and postdocs in the Medical Futures Lab. And so I would like to thank them for their help and assistance in this project. So you might be wondering, what are the translational humanities? So translational humanities are multidisciplinary, multimodal efforts that understand, preserve, and contribute to local narratives and academic scholarship in partnership with communities that best benefit the public. So translational humanities research is multidirectional and iterative, and it is a cyclic process where research builds off of itself. And so we believe that the humanities offer unique and critically important insights, observations, and methods that can improve the human condition and help alleviate suffering in the pandemic response. So the goal of our project is to identify and document humanities-based and humanities-inspired responses to health crises. This could be the COVID pandemic, which we've been working on for the past 2 years, but more recently, we're trying to shift to other health crises as well. We also have a public website, which we use to disseminate all the insights from different humanities-based projects so that scholars, students, health professionals, community organizations who are engaged in helping communities thrive can really benefit from all of the different humanities projects out there. And we also are planning to collaborate with community organizations and policymakers so that they can also benefit from humanities approaches to public health. So there are multiple different facets of this project, and we first start out with the survey, and then we also have a website. We're continuing to do interviews and outreach, and we're also planning on improving our social media response. So our survey is through Qualtrics, and we basically created a survey so that we can identify humanities-based responses to public health crises and document that. And we're interested in a variety of different pandemic and health crises responses and how these different projects involve different dimensions of humanities and social sciences. And so we use Qualtrics to collect our responses, and we assemble that into a database. And we've been working with Jeff Koffler and John Mulligan to create a website. And we've received hundreds of responses from all over the globe from this survey. So our website presents these projects in an easy to access way so that anyone can really explore each of these projects in depth. And so we want this to be open to a variety of different individuals, whether you're a scholar, a policymaker, a community organization, to really have the ability to explore all of these different projects and learn from them. And so we're trying to revise our website design to make it more accessible to both students and community organizations. And that's something that we're continuing to do. We also created a selection of featured projects which will soon be displayed in the homepage, and that will have a few projects under each subheading. And so the subheading could be things like graphic medicine, narrative medicine, art, technology, and different topics that a visitor to the site can click on and see what are the different projects in those categories. And we're also planning on archiving the website through Fondren. So this is what the website looks like. We see a main bar here. This is the homepage. You can see we have the ability to search for different projects, search by humanities field, audience, project output, and visualizations. And once we search for a project and we come to an individual project, this is what the project page will look like. There's a project description, information about the PI, and then different resources that visitors can access to get more information about the project. Something that I've been working on more specifically within the team is collaborating with Dr. Danica Brown and Warren Kinney from the Rice CCL. And so what we want to do is advertise our website to community partners and connect with these community partners to make sure that our work is more accessible to them. And so this includes editing the language of our form to be less academic and more tailored towards the needs of community organizations. And also, it also involves learning from community organizations on how what our website can do that can best serve them. And we're also additionally working with the Baker Institute for Public Policy on creating public policy proposals that summarize how all these different translational humanities projects can be useful for policymakers. Lastly, we've been working on interviews. So Dr. Travis Alexander, who is a postdoc, has interviewed a lot of PIs on many of the projects featured on the site. And these interviews are meant to be kind of a snapshot of the different projects available on the site. And we're working on publishing these video interviews on YouTube so that people can watch the interviews and learn more about the project from the PI themselves. Because a lot of times, especially with the website, you're reading about the project, but maybe not from the perspective of the PI who is actually doing the work. And it's great to hear from the PIs about the different humanities approaches that they're working on. And so we plan on sharing these interviews and then working on improving our social media output so that lots of people can really engage with these projects and learn about the work that we're doing. And so those are some of the things that we're continuing to work on in this project. And that's pretty much all I had. I would encourage everyone here to check out the website, transhumhelp.rice.edu. And if you have any questions, let me know. Thank you.
Super cool. Thanks so much, Arnav. We'll hold questions till the end so we can make sure we hear from all the project teams. Speaking of project teams, next up, we have the team members of the Racial Geography Project, Chaney Hill, Stephen Westich, and Venus Almanji. So take it away, guys.
Okay, can you all see the slideshow, everyone? Great. Okay, so thank you. I'm Chaney Hill, and we are 3 fellows that were nominated by the Racial Geography Project. So there's also Venus, who is in this panel as well, and Stephen. So our 4 projects, we are looking, it's for the Racial Geography Project, which is an initiative of the Task Force on Slavery, Segregation, and Racial Injustice at Rice University. And so this collective investigates histories of racism and resistance registered at Rice University, including its lands, its buildings, and its monuments. So each of us are actually doing pretty different projects. My charge for my Fondren Fellowship was to research connections between William Marsh Rice, the early Board of Trustees, and the secessionist movement. Marc, who is unable to join us today, but has been doing great work, is researching the role of eugenics in the first decades of the Rice Institute, and is also looking at the scholarship and teaching of relevant eugenicists such as Julian Huxley and J.W. Slaughter. Venus, who is trained by Dr. Bird last year to conduct oral interviews, and histories is interviewing Black women and like early Black women professors and students at Rice and kind of collecting those. And then Stephen has been doing research on architectural styles represented on the Rice University campus. Each of us is going to talk a little bit more about what that looks like. So I'm going to start us off. So my research started, I was doing some research for a different project on the phrase Imperium and Imperio. I was doing research on Sutton Griggs's text by that name. And I was looking at the history and kind of early text usage of this phrase. And in the kind of newspaper archive that I was able to dig up with this phrase, I found that particularly in Texas, Imperium and Imperio was used a handful of ways. One was to support like states' rights, which of course, during the 1800s, this was a lot of times used as kind of justification for slavery and the Civil War kind of more broadly. The other thing that it was kind of used to reference was kind of nativist and exclusionist ideologies by Anglo settlers in Texas about the indigenous groups that lived in the area and formed their own Imperium and Imperio, which means nation within a nation. And it was used to kind of displace them in a way. So I started thinking about this and I realized that the phrase Imperium and Imperio is on the side of William Marsh Rice's statue. It's engraved. It would be on this side right here, and it's really blurry. I wasn't able to get a great picture, but this is the Texas seal, and this is the phrase Imperium and Imperio. So I was thinking, well, why is this the case? Why is this something that's on the founder statue? So that's kind of what sprung this research kind of into the Fondren Fellowship. Where I've gone from there is a lot of different ways. I have looked at a lot of different archival materials that the Woodson has. And today I want to share with you one thing that I found, which is here on the other side of the screen right here. So this is something that I found in President Edgar Odell Levitt's papers. It was alongside correspondence about the construction of the founder's statue. This document, upon further research, was originally published in 1936 by a guy named Robert Edward Edmondson, who is a white supremacist. He was a organizer of the Pan-Aryan Conference, and then later a lot of his work inspired many other white supremacists to publish many other white supremacist publications. This is an early kind of work of this. And it was this document was originally published in an anti-Semitic, anti-communist book, of which there are only 6 copies in the US, one of which is at the Holocaust Museum in DC. This was in Levitt's paperwork. We don't know why, we don't know the context behind it, but this is kind of an anti-Semitic, anti-communist document that I found, kind of accusing President Roosevelt of being involved in a cabal of puppet masters behind the scenes, working to take over the US government in some kind of way. So like I said, we don't know why this document was in his documents and Levitt's documents, but I did wonder, this was alongside a lot of the paperwork that was where Levitt was corresponding with Cram and Ferguson, the builders of the company that kind of got John Angel, the sculptor of the statue. He was not an American, and Levitt was expressing some concern that the sculptor for the statue was not an American. And so I'm wondering if perhaps it's maybe there's a connection there. I'm not sure. But this is one of the things that I found most interesting in my research thus far. There's of course gaps in the archive, and in the coming weeks and into the summer, I'm going to be continuing to kind of research these gaps. I plan to look at further archival materials at the Houston Public Library, and try to further kind of find out the political leanings of the early founders and of other kind of important figures in the early years of the Institute's inception, and kind of figure out how these ideologies had a hand in shaping the policy and the campus culture in the years to come. So I'm going to go ahead and pass things off to Venus.
Hey everyone, my name is Venus, and this Chaney introduced what I was doing. I'm studying the histories and experiences of early Black women professors and students at Rice. I did oral history interviews last semester, spoke to professors and alum, which I really enjoyed. And this semester, though, I focused mostly on archival research. And I spent a lot of time at the Woodson. There I was able to find that, for example, Professor Rosemary Brewer, one of the early, if not the first Black woman professor at Rice, when she was leaving in 1977, one of her reasons for leaving was because she felt that the university didn't do enough to make a home for minority faculty and students. This is academically, socially, and culturally. So it was interesting to learn all of that. I also, as much as I really enjoyed going through the archives and doing these interviews, I found myself frustrated several times throughout the process. And this was because there are a lot of gaps in the archives. I wasn't finding what I needed to find on a granular level. I also felt a little overwhelmed because I was like, I like what I'm doing, it's important, but I'm not really sure how to congeal it into a sort of cohesive narrative. So recently I decided to pivot to maybe a more question-oriented research. And the question I'm really trying to explore right now is what is needed for Black students, faculty, and staff to belong at Rice? That feels like a very big question as well. But I think that in a way I've been more grounded by it. One, because there's so much in the archives surrounding this question, and the question continues to be important even today. I also think that for the near future as well, it's salient. So I like that through line in time. I think that there are a lot of common answers that have been given to this question, but just reading, going through the archives, I saw that there are a lot of disagreements, a lot of arguments surrounding this question. I also really like the question because it's one that organically, in the interviews I did, there were a lot of suggestions that organically were given to this question. One sort of next step for my research right now would be to interview someone called Dr. Richard Tapia. He is a math professor of Mexican descent. He's been at Rice since the 70s, and he was someone who's been very critical, who was, well, one, very involved in trying to make sure that minority students in general had a home at Rice, and also very critical of Rice for its failings to ensure that. And so I'm excited to, at the very least, lay the groundwork for him to be interviewed and hopefully do it myself. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Chaney and Venus. I'm Stephen Westich. I'm in art history. And my role in this project is to focus on the role of race and racialization in the development of the unique stylistic program of the Rice Institute, with a special attention paid to Lovett Hall, which is and was intended to be from the beginning emblematic of the Institute's identity and values. There are two main strands that I've developed thus far that I will briefly summarize. The first is establishing that the terms for selecting a stylistic program was a very fraught and interesting dialogue and was explicitly racial in character. Two dialogue partners, for the most part, the Board of Trustees on the one hand, headed up by Edgar Lovett, And on the other hand, the architectural firm that was hired that Chaney alluded to earlier of Cram, Ferguson, and Goodhue. The architectural firm was hired because they were famous for Neo-Gothic style architecture, which the Board of Trustees were interested in deploying. But the architectural firm, especially Ralph Adams Cram, thought that such an Anglo-Saxon style of architecture would be inappropriate for this region of the country. And they suggested Spanish mission style. And there was a very stringent rejection of this idea. And the rejection of it is just a fascinating thing in itself in the archive, because it's referred to in several different ways. The actual meeting itself is not documented, but one account I found in a newspaper suggests that the rejection was accompanied with a racial slur. Because the Board of Trustees wanted to have nothing to do with any allusion to Hispanic heritage. So the result was this invention, this eclectic invention that I will argue is intended to help construct and underwrite an Anglo-Texan identity. And that leads to the second part, which is the way that this style was meant to denote a monumental, cultural, and colonial stamp on what was considered to be virgin soil. This tabula rasa notion is worked on by Giovanna Bassi, another member of our project, and you can listen to her podcast. And the architecture plays a specific role, and I want to show how the style is designed to bring what they thought was something European, a cultural stamp that would bring culture to a place that had none previously. And so Julian Huxley, whom we have heard mentioned, a prominent eugenicist and founder of Rice's biology department, visited in 1912, and I'll give you a brief quote that I think goes well with this photograph, which was taken just a year later to illustrate this, this thread of thinking. He says, speaking of this building, "Here it stood, brilliant, astounding, enduring, rising out of the barren brown prairie, which extended unbroken, save for a belt of trees to the horizon and far beyond." And so I think that we can see the way that the land is being considered here. I will just say at this point, thank you so much. Those are my quick summaries. My time is up, but this is fascinating research, and I'm happy to go forward with it.
Thanks so much. What really important, fascinating work. And the mentor on that project, by the way, is Dr. Fabiola Lopez Duran. Next up, we have Juliana Fan talking about the Sugarland 95 mapping convict leasing in Fort Bend County, which is a project mentored by Dr. Portia Hopkins and Amanda Foki, among others, in the woods. So take it away.
Hello, so I'm just going to share my screen really quick. Yes, so hello, I'm Juliana Fan, and my presentation is The Greatest Beneath Modern Fort Bend County. This is again about the Sugarland 95, and I'm just going to be going over a demographic analysis of Fort Bend County and the Imperial Sugar Farm in the wake of Sugarland 95. So to start, I'll be talking more about Fort Bend County and going into some background about the Imperial Sugar, slavery, convict leasing, and the Sugarland 95. And I'll be going into the demographic analysis work that I've done, and I've conducted usually mostly using ArcGIS and R and Census and ACS data, and I'll go over the legacy of convict leasing today. So just as an introduction, this is some of the research that I did with the archival research, looking into the history of convict leasing, looking into maps and things like that. So I want to start off by talking about how Fort Bend County today is recognized as the most diverse county in Texas and one of the most diverse counties in the nation, because there's an equal division of white, Black, Asian, and Hispanic population. Sugarland in Fort Bend County was founded in sugarcane production and had lots of sugar plantations. So from 1908 and 1928, they were founded and expanded mostly by Imperial Sugar. But today, they're mostly master planned suburbs and are largely detached from that history of slavery and convict leasing. Imperial Sugar had lots of sugar plantations across Sugarland and Fort Bend County, and they relied largely on enslaved African Americans for their labor. Once slavery had been abolished, convict leasing was a replacement for it, meaning that the state would lease out convicts to private companies to do agricultural labor. Once convict leasing was prohibited in 1910, the state itself started to force their convicts into agricultural labor. And the Imperial Prison Farm, started by the state of Texas, was not closed until 2011. And this is just a map of the Imperial and Harlem State prison farms. This is across all of Fort Bend County, and you can see the Brazos River as one of the borders for it. And the Sugar Land 95 was an unmarked grave found in 2018 of 95 African-American individuals who were most likely victims of convict leasing. And this was found during the construction of the Fort Bend Independent School District James Reese Career and Technical Center. And something that I thought was very notable when I was looking into this research was how the location of the James Reese Career and Technical Center is almost exactly on top of the original site for the Imperial State Farm Prison Camp. And so it's not a coincidence that those bodies were found. And it's also not a coincidence that the Fort Bend Independent School District had wanted to build their career center there in the first place. So there's lots of records between the state of Texas, school districts, and local development companies where they're intentionally trying to cover up areas where there might be cemeteries, and they're trying to erase the history of the sugar plantations and slavery in Fort Bend County. So now I'll be going over the demographic analysis that I want to conduct. And I specifically chose a demographic analysis because I thought it's important for us to think critically about the racial diversity that we see in the area and make sure that we understand that diversity can't be completely understood without understanding how it is shaped around the sugar plantation, slavery, and the Ellis plantation, and the prison farm. So first I want to go over the population growth that we see in Fort Bend County. So I was doing these visualizations in R and ArcGIS. And something I thought was notable was how in recent years, especially around from 1970 until present day, there's a very large increase in the Hispanic and Asian population in Fort Bend County. And if we look at population growth by race and time period during antebellum, so before slavery was abolished, enslaved persons, especially enslaved African Americans, had outnumbered white people in the county around 2 to 1. And then during Reconstruction, because those enslaved Africans are now free, the Black and African American population is almost 3 times as much as the white population. By Jim Crow, however, that divide starts to decrease. And by the time of the Great Migration, where lots of African Americans were forced to leave the area and go to more urban areas, the white population is starting to outnumber the Black population. And by present day, the African American population in Fort Bend County is actually on a decline, while the white, Asian, and Hispanic populations are significantly growing. So something I thought was important with this is that the white and Black populations seem to be migrating and moving away from the area where the plantation used to be. So you can see in the white population that is on the outskirts away from the city and then less densely populated areas and tend to be also higher income. The Hispanic population is stuck in smaller areas, and the Asian population is where you see where the plantation used to be, and then the Black population is actually closer to Harris County, so they're being almost moved out. So the most important thing here was, I thought, is that if you looked at like based on income, Sugar Land itself, and we see this where the plantation is or used to be, is 47.8% white, 38.2% Asian, and 81.2% owner-occupied housing, meaning lots of the people there own the houses that they live in. This is a good indicator of generational wealth and the fact that those people are going to be significantly more privileged than the people living on the outskirts of the county and closer to Harris County. So the diversity that we see in Fort Bend County and that the county is very known for is a way of them trying to erase history. Because you look at the plantation and where it used to be, the populations that are most directly affected by it, people that are US born, are actually very far away from it, either on the east or closer to the west corner of it, closer to Harris County. The people that live in that area where the plantation used to be, and especially around the area where the prison farm used to be, are mostly not US born. That's where they have the largest population of people who are not US born. These are immigrants who were moving into that area. Many of them high income, if you look at the map as well, how median income is distributed across the county. So I mean, these are high income immigrants who are moving into the area and are very detached from the history there. So this is a very easy way for them to be able to hide the history. If you see the original modern landmarks that I showed earlier in the presentation, the Black community is very distant from that. So it's a very intentional way of the Black people moving out, of the communities who are directly impacted by slavery and convict leasing are moving out, and the people living there are no longer able to have that connection to the history. So for some more concluding thoughts, in the legacy of the Sugar Land 95, there are more graves and remains across Sugar Land and Fort Bend County yet to be discovered. There's a disconnect between the original land and impacted communities, and the intention of developments on the original land are largely to erase the history there. So whether or not the development companies or the people now in charge of the area are trying to erase it, the legacy of slavery, convict leasing, and the Sugar Land 95 will continue to haunt Fort Bend County. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much. Oh, I need to do the applause here. So next up, we have Ben Schachter, Victoria Zabarte, and Caitlin Landry, who will be discussing Where is Texas on the Slave Voyages website, which is mentored by Dr. Daniel Dominguez and Dr. Molly Morgan.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Victoria Sabarte. My colleagues, Caitlin Landry and Ben Schachter, and I are senior history majors working on the slave voyages at Rice research team. We're so excited to be here with you all to share our research project, Reconstructing the Maritime Slave Trade to the Texas Gulf Coast. This afternoon, we'll be talking about the information we've learned about voyages that carried enslaved people to Texas in the 19th century, and our efforts to add our data to the Slave Voyages database. For those of you who aren't aware of the Slave Voyages website, it's a free and globally accessible database that is the world's largest repository of information regarding voyages of ships that carried enslaved people across the Atlantic from Africa and between points within the Americas. Although the database has been around for over 2 decades, Texas ports have not been listed as ports involved in the traffic of enslaved people in either the transatlantic or intra-American trades. So starting in March 2021, the 3 of us joined a team of researchers to address this absence of information about Texas coastwise slave trade. By the end of 2022, we will be making this newly uncovered historical data available to the public via the Slave Voyages database.
In 1807, the United States Congress signed an act to prohibit the importation of enslaved people from foreign nations. This act included 2 sections requiring that all enslaved people who were being transported from one domestic United States port to another be documented on manifests. Beginning in 1808, before each voyage embarked, ship captains would file an outward manifest, which listed all the enslaved people aboard the vessel, as well as the enslavers and shippers coordinating their forced migration. A customs collector at the port of disembarkation would then have to verify that information on an inward manifest before allowing the ship to dock. This documentation measure was intended to enforce the prohibition of direct international importation of enslaved people and further regulate the domestic trade as well.
We identified and compiled about 3,000 copies of manifests originally issued at New Orleans, Mobile, and Savannah, indicating Texas ports as their ships' destinations. The information collected from the manifest included a list of all enslaved people that the captain intended to carry on the ship, those enslaved people's names, sex, age, stature, and class, meaning race or skin color as described by the enslaver. The manifest also included key information about the name and place of residence of the enslavers or shippers, as well as the ship's details, including the type of vessel, its tonnage, place of registration, and intended port of destination. We gathered this information and populated a spreadsheet on Google Sheets, mimicking the structure of the original documents, but with the added ability of running statistical analyses. Every variable that we can identify on the manifest is represented on the spreadsheet. There's a column for names, ages, heights, etc.
In total, the outward manifests document the transportation of at least 15,000 enslaved Black Americans to the coast of what would become Texas. This number is significantly about 7 times larger than estimates of arrivals directly from Africa or via the Caribbean, but it remained just a fraction of the overland trade estimates. The greatest port of embarkation in the coastwise traffic was New Orleans, with just under 15,000 enslaved people leaving this port, followed by Mobile with over 300 people, and Savannah with 9. The traffic lasted for a period of 34 years, starting in 1827, with the voyage of a young man named Henry Long. During that time, Texas was broken up into provinces of Mexico. From that period and into the Republic era, the trade saw an annual average of 62 people transported. However, not every year saw a shipment to the coast. The late 1820s and 1836, the year that Texas gained its independence from Mexico, saw no shipments. Everything drastically changed after Texas joined the Union as a slave state. From 1845 to the eve of the US Civil War in 1860, an average of 890 people were transported annually. During the statehood period, the traffic peaked 3 times, coinciding with relevant political events, most notably the Mexican-American War from 1846 to 48, and the adoption of the Fugitive Slave Act in 1850. The traffic, as recorded by these extant outward manifests, came to a close at the beginning of the US Civil War with the forced migration of a young woman named Anna.
Altogether, ships transported enslaved people to at least 26 ports along the Texas coast, located from the Sabine Lake on the boundary with Louisiana to the Rio Grande on the border with Mexico. These ports can be grouped into 7 regions. Galveston Bay was the principal region of disembarkation. The regions of Brazos, Matagorda, and Port Lavaca constituted the second largest. And the traffic also involved 3 other relatively minor regions, the Sabine Lake region, the Aransas Bay region, and Brazos Santiago. A series of bays behind a thin barrier island connected all of these ports, and a network of navigable rivers tied them to plantations and other cities further inland.
The manifests not only allow us to learn about the size, evolution, and geographic distribution of the traffic, but also how gender and age impacted the growth of African American communities in Texas. Because enslavers saw the coastwise trade as an economic opportunity, they focused their efforts on transporting particular populations of enslaved people. By conducting a demographic analysis of the captives intended to disembark in Texas, we found that infants and children constituted nearly 40% of the enslaved population transported to Texas throughout the duration of the coastwise traffic. Moreover, men and women were transported in roughly equal numbers in the trade to Texas. Both the prevalence of infants and children in the traffic and the balanced sex distribution differ significantly from the transatlantic slave trade, which rarely transported infants and children and greatly favored male captives. Enslavers in Texas preferred these specific demographics, which they believed would provide both physical and reproductive labor in the future.
By cross-referencing the data we've gathered from these manifests with other sources, we can begin to build a more holistic understanding of the full lived experiences of enslaved people both before and after they arrived in Texas. For example, Joshua Rothman's The Ledger and the Chain mentions letters from an enslaved woman named Virginia Boyd to Samuel Boyd, a prominent judge and slave trader from Mississippi. She was pregnant with their 3rd child together when he asked one of his fellow traders to, quote, get rid of her, by sending her and her children to another trader in New Orleans. Boyd then believed that Virginia was still too close to him in New Orleans and asked the trader to send the very pregnant Virginia and her children to Houston via Galveston. By searching for her in our database, we can account for the 1853 born Virginia and her young daughters, 7-year-old Louisa and 2-year-old Amelia, who remained unnamed in the aforementioned book. This story sheds vivid light on the treatment of pregnant enslaved women.
The manifests can also help augment our understanding of historical figures whose involvement in the institution of slavery has long been omitted from romantic narratives of Texas history. For example, we discovered that Mirabeau Lamar, the 2nd president of the Republic of Texas, filled out 2 different manifests for ships upon which he intended to transport a total of 11 enslaved people from New Orleans to Galveston. These manifests allow researchers to know the names of certain people who he enslaved, at least 5 of whom were children, for the first time. Like most Anglo-Texan heroes of the Texas Revolution, Lamar is a widely revered figure in Texas history, having schools, streets, and a county named after him, while his racist attitudes are often excused or ignored. These documents instead allow us to focus on John, Wesley, Fred, Lucy, Fanny, Charlotte, Martha, Rafe, William, Rhett, and John, all listed here, who do not receive the same amount of recognition.
To conclude, we've found records of over 15,000 enslaved people who were transported to the shores of Texas coast during the first half of the 19th century. These manifests provide a painfully intimate glimpse into their experiences, from week-old infants to elderly matriarchs on their voyages across the Gulf. Our next step is to make all of this data publicly accessible via the Slave Voyages online database later this year, which we hope will expand the scope of resources to remember and reconstruct the lives of the enslaved in Texas. Additionally, this Friday, we will be unveiling a poster exhibit showcasing our work on the first floor central hallway of Fondren Library. And we have many thanks to Amanda Foki for her help setting this up. We still have a lot to learn about the state's involvement in slavery and the slave trade, but we hope that the documents we have collected here can supplement further historical and genealogical research and emphasize the critical role of the coastwise traffic in the history of the Lone Star State. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. That was terrific. Next up, we have Grace Neidl talking about mapping the reservation, Houston's red light district, 1908 to 1917. And Brian Riedel is the mentor for that project.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Grace. Thank you to Lisa and Sydney for putting on this showcase for us. I'll be talking about the reservation today. Not many people know that Houston once had its own red light district, and one such district was established in 1908 in Freedmantown, in an area of the Fourth Ward home to mostly Black residents. This red light district came to be known as the reservation. My project focuses on land ownership at the edge of the reservation because Block 8, highlighted in yellow here, has a complete set of data to analyze. In this project, I estimate landowner wages to see what their land ownership meant to them. As the project continues, these wage estimates will help me to determine what sex worker wages in the reservation may have been. So I have two research questions for this project. The first is about how much money did landowners make at their jobs? And the second is, what was the relative meaning of land ownership to different property owners? I used a 4-step process to estimate landowner wages. First, I identified the start year of land ownership by looking at property deeds from the Harris County Clerk Archives. By focusing on the first year of land ownership, I can determine the relative wealth of landowners when they first purchased property. Next, I searched for each landowner's occupation in the Houston City Directory. The city directory was published almost every year from 1866 to 1923, so many individuals are included in several editions. When compiling the data, I used the closest possible year in the city directory to the individual start date, and then I was able to find data for 21 of the 27 landowners. The other 6 landowners were either companies or they didn't have any listed occupation. Once I had city directory occupations, I needed to match them with the occupations listed in a wage database from the time period. My source of wage data was the 18th annual report of the Commissioner of Labor from the US Department of Commerce and Labor, which was published in 1903. It contains data from a survey of 25,440 families across the United States, so it has a wide range of occupations listed, making for a much easier matching process. And finally, after matching city directory occupations with 18th annual report occupations, I was able to connect the 1903 wages to the Block 8 landowners. For the sake of time, I'm going to focus on the wage estimates I found for 2 individuals, Simeon Willis and Louis A. Freed. The table here shows the progression of all the steps I've described, beginning with the start year and ending with the 18th annual report wage. Ultimately, I estimate that Simeon Willis made about $400 to $500 a year as a sexton, while Louis A. Freed made at least $1,000 a year as a bookkeeper. Knowing how much money Simeon and Louis made allows us to compare what land ownership may have meant to each of their families. Simeon and his wife, Susan, were both marked as colored in the city directory. When Simeon passed away in 1889, Susan inherited all of Block 8. She ends up selling all 12 lots in 1891 for $630 more than Simeon's original purchase price. On the other hand, L.A. Freed, who was not marked by race in the city directory, made a total of $2,100 by buying and selling land in the reservation. For a few brief months in 1893, he owned all of Block 8, and over time, he sold off all 12 lots of Block 8 for much more than he originally paid for it. My landowner wage estimates are a way to contextualize these real estate profits. Before Simeon passed away, the Willis family income was about $400 to $500 a year, whereas L.A. Freed made at least $1,000 a year as a bookkeeper. So, according to the estimated landowner profits, $630 of profit to the Willis family and $2,100 of profit to L.A. Freed both meant roughly 2 years of work. These profits seem very different at face value, but relative to the family's occupations, they have about the same meaning. Moving forward, I plan to use these wage estimates to explore the economic lives of sex workers in the reservation. As we discover more about the land holdings of sex workers, we can estimate their economic power by comparing their properties to those of their neighbors. Many people expect sex workers to make low wages, but we'll see if that is the case in the reservation. And here are my acknowledgements and references. Thank you especially to Dr. Riedel and to Will Vim of the Spatial Studies Lab, and thank you all for your time.
Thanks so much, Grace. Really fascinating research. Finally, we have Maddie Prowse, who will be speaking about making sense of government education resources. And the mentors are Anna Zhang and Dr. Aaron Baumgartner.
There we go. All right, well, hello, my name is Madison Prowse. I'm presenting on making sense of government education resources. My co-mentors are Anna and Aaron. And as you probably found out through your projects, that research is not always smooth. So we welcome you on our journey with this project as we navigate through expected difficulties and outcomes. This fall, we designed our research using an iterative design. We contacted 30 HISD departments and 9 nonprofit and community organizations. I assessed and selected the following 4 education partners and to understand how each organization uses data and send an invitation to participate in a short interview. We did not receive responses from those contacted, unfortunately, and those possible limitations of the project could be attributed to Zoom fatigue, poor timing with the beginning of the school year, the length of the fellowship. So I decided to archive the project for future use at a better time. I then enacted Plan B to collect user experience and work with the UX office, but the limitations included timing close to winter break, limited knowledge in conducting an effective survey to properly deal with human subjects, in addition to privacy rights and time to recruit users. Plan C was launched, a research process to discover that no pre-existing LibGuide on education databases were found on Fondren Library's Education Research Guide at the federal, state, and independent sites, as well as on Fondren Library's Government Information LibGuide on the Education tab. And hidden deep on the Microform LibGuide, Eric is linked and briefly mentions the accessibility methods to Eric, but has no unique connection or instruction to Fondren's unique microfiche collection of the ERIC documents. So our project is especially valuable, we found out, because we've created a new resource dedicated to education that highlights Fondren Library's ERIC microfiche collection and provides engaging instructions for users to use in their research. I researched and selected these 2 LibGuides on ERIC documents as examples, and each has useful content. I integrated the content from the two LibGuides previously mentioned and considered and differentiated the use of different audiences like rice users and non-rice users, in addition to customizing instruction for searching, accessing, and using the ERIC documents resources at or through Fondren Library. Anna and Hannah and I did a preliminary investigation on the contents of the ERIC microfiche collection at the Fondren Library, and together we identified some problems to be addressed in the future, including accessing the collection and the handling and retrieval process of the ERIC microfiche collection. When creating my final product, I was inspired to include screenshots and notations from the mentioned LibGuides, as you can see demonstrated here. I also made improvements with video tutorials to demonstrate, and here is an example of what you can find on the ERIC LibGuide.
Access ERIC via EBSCO from Rice University's Fondren Library website with the hyperlink here. We should access a page that looks like this. Right, you can either type in ERIC in the search field or click on the letter E for ERIC and scroll down until you find ERIC via EBSCO. For convenience sake, let's just type in ERIC and click on ERIC via EBSCO. Remember, you will have to sign in with your Rice credentials to access ERIC via EBSCO.
And that's just a sneak peek at what is provided there. So finally, I provided for future use 5 recommendations with government education research. This includes guiding and educating users with the ERIC microfiche collection. Also to improve access and increase the visibility of the ERIC LibGuide. In addition to trying different times to connect with education stakeholders, I recommend the summer months from June to August, which is a lower season and less busy time for school administrators and nonprofit leaders. In addition to recruiting an individual who knows how to conduct a usability test on information resources and existing instructional materials. And finally, to focus on 1 to 2 education research resources with the priorities being NCES and US Census Bureau for education statistics and education related research for 1 semester. Oops. And finally, I'd like to acknowledge the following individuals: Anna and Aaron for your dedicated support as co-mentors. Your feedback and throughout the process was incredible and incredibly optimistic. In addition to Deborah, Amanda, and Hannah, without your assistance, this project wouldn't have been possible. And especially thanks to the Fondren Fellowship for the funding, opportunity, and guidance, and especially Lisa and Sydney, who offered the utmost support.
Well, thank you so much. I'm truly impressed with all of these projects. When we met in the fall, it was really thrilling to hear about them, and just to see these realized is even more inspiring. So thank you so much for all your great work. We have a few minutes for questions. If you would like to raise your hand or put your questions into the chat, or just shout them out. We can be casual here. But we're seeing lots of praise in the chat as well, well-deserved praise. So do y'all have any questions? Okay, well, I am not seeing any questions and we are at 4 o'clock. But I did want to say again, thank you so much to the fellows for their wonderful work and to the mentors for all their support. I should also say thank you to the John Terry Maltzberger Estate for their support of the Fondren Fellows Endowment. And thank you all for being here today to learn about all these wonderful projects. So have a great rest of your day.